This is Jodia Vanel, CEO and founder of Nesvanmar, a management consulting and project management firm. I'm also the host of Biz Talks, a business series which features entrepreneurs and small businesses where we follow their journey and motivate and inspire everyone who's watching. Today, I'm so excited to bring to you episode number 10, featuring Armstrong Williams, a television broadcast owner, television host, writer, author, real estate tycoon, international hotelier, and mentor to many. I can't wait for you all to watch this episode. Welcome to the show, Armstrong. I'm so happy to have you here.
Duchess Vanel, on your 10th episode, I am so honored to be a part of your new broadcast platform, and just thank you for having me on talking about business owners. I think it's a wonderful topic, and we need more entrepreneurs around the world.
Let's get right into it. Armstrong, can you share your journey into entrepreneurship with us?
Well, I grew up on the dirt in Marion, South Carolina, which is very close to Myrtle Beach, on a cattle, swine, small grain, vegetable, chicken, cattle farm. And my values come from that dirt. It was early to rise, early to bed. We were up like 4:30 in the morning, unloading tobacco barns, and then in the tobacco field by 7:30 or 8, cropping tobacco, suckling tobacco. Tobacco was the main crop for our income. And we had 2,000 head of swine. We had a lot of cattle, horses. And so I grew up as a rancher, as a farmer, with my parents and my 8 brothers and 2 sisters. And so my parents owned the farm. So all my life, I worked for my parents until I went off to college to attend South Carolina State University. And my parents were entrepreneurs. And so it's in my bloodline. I actually thought I would be an author in life. It never struck me that I would ever become an entrepreneur because the tobacco farm, Jodia, was just such hard work. I mean, the mosquitoes, the gnats, the insect, the sweltering heat. And we also had cotton and hay and barley and wheat. It was just such work and such exercise. The hardest work I've ever done in my life was before I ever reached the age of 18 years old. What I'm doing now is sort of like the yellow brick road, because I know I get to sit behind a desk with employees all around the world. I get to give instructions. I get to use my creativity to read books and grow. It's not any manual labor anymore, because to me, I respect anyone who's involved in that manual labor. It's especially when it's on those hot summer days.
Armstrong, you grew up in Marion, South Carolina, on a farm. What lessons did you learn from the farm or from your family that you've implemented in business?
Well, everything to us was a garden. Everything was about the earth, nature. I remember some of the early lessons that there were trees that had been on the farm probably since the 1800s. And yet you grow other crops and other vegetables and even the flower garden around those trees. And while certain crops will do well in that same bed and on that same piece of land, my father was very wise. He said, while that tree may provide many nutrients, but because it's been there so long because of the shade, there are other plants that are not allowed to grow. They don't get the sunshine. They don't get the nourishment. And sometimes what you got to do, you got to root up old businesses. You got to root up old crops. And you got to start fresh to give something else a chance to grow. So some of those trees that were 100 and 150 years old, they were rooted up. And while for a couple of seasons, we paid the price for it in terms of productivity, but 3 or 4 years later, what was able to crop up, it was able to sprout up, fed the family for 5 or 6 years. So sometimes you got to change the garden. The garden is like life. The garden is like business. And another thing my father taught me, in a garden, when you have many vegetables, when you have different crops on the farm, different kind of livestock on the farm, sometimes the cattle may do well for the season. but the swine may not do well. Sometimes the tobacco farm may do well, while the wheat and barley may not do well. And so my father always taught us that in order to be successful in businesses, you have to have 5 different businesses that are totally unrelated. And my father said, I'm willing to bet you in any season, 3 will always thrive and 2 will always suffer, but the 3 will sustain the 2 that suffer. So he said, son, if you ever decide to go in business one day, find 5 businesses that are totally unrelated, build those businesses, grow those businesses, and I'm willing to bet you they will always sustain themselves. You'll never struggle. You'll be able to meet your payroll. You'll be able to take care of your employees, pay bonuses, take a little vacation here and there, but grow businesses, not just one, but you got to grow them like roots. And once those roots catch root, then they'll feed themselves. And I hold that value true today, Jodia.
Such a great lesson about diversifying your portfolio and having many streams of income. So in the 80s, you moved to the big city, DC. At what point did you have your aha moment that you had a business idea that could actually thrive?
It didn't necessarily work that way for me. My story is a little different. We did not grow. The typical story for many entrepreneurs is one from rags to riches. And if you just happen to be American who happen to be African American, it's the assumption that it's always about racism and bigotry, and you're trying to escape the harshness of the society and to have your own. But it was not my story. Certainly my parents had the story of growing up on the sharecropper's farm and the disrespect and the slackness. But my father always said he wanted his children to grow up with a sense of freedom, a sense of independence, a sense of knowing what it's like to own instead of working for someone. So during the 40s, when my father decided to pursue owning his own land, at the time, he, as a black man, could not buy a farm. So he had to have this guy by the name Buckingham Davis front for him. It's the only way he could buy this farm at auction. And so in the early 40s, they bought this farm, the farm that still exists in the family today, for $800. And when it was announced that he bought the land from my father, James Williams, there was an interesting reaction in the community. The whites felt my father was being uppity and did not know his place. And the blacks felt my father was trying to be better than they were. But my father said that his attitude was, you cannot please anybody. You just got to find your path. You got to clear the land, and you got to build a future for you and the children of that generation to come. So I grew up not even anything close to poverty. My parents were able to pay for the education of all my brothers and sisters who graduated from high school, who wanted to go to college. They were able to pay cash for it. And so when I graduated from college, I had no debt. I certainly didn't want to remain on the farm working because, like I said earlier in the conversation, it was just hard work, not something I wanted to do. I wanted to be more creative, more imaginative. I wanted it to relate to reading books and building something with my brain instead of my hands. And so when I left South Carolina State after graduating, I remember my parents had already found me a place on Capitol Hill. And my father sustained me until I found a job as an intern at the Department of Agriculture. So I never really had to think about finding a job or building a business because I was struggling one. I remember I was home visiting the family. My father said that I'm not going to longer be able to sustain you and pay you a stipend because you've got other brothers and sisters coming along and you're on your own now. You will not get that check or that envelope from your parents like you've done in the past. And so I was startled by it. And so, and I really paid that, no, never mind. You know what it's like. Your parents can say anything they want to say, but until you begin to realize that you cannot pay for things that you used to pay for, you cannot do the things that you used to do, go to places you used to go. And then all of this thing, all of a sudden, something came to me about paycheck to paycheck. I never had to struggle, worry about money. And I was in Washington, D.C. So I never forget, I called my father, I had a conversation with him, and I said, wow, I think I'm feeling a pinch here. I remember the term pinch. And my father said something to me very interesting. This is what he said. And, you know, even though he sleeps, I love my father. He was my man, my best friend. He was the man that I looked up to, my hero. My father said, well, son, you can always be an entrepreneur. He said, you have the gifts. I always said that it's you. You always took care of taxes. You took care of finances, the bills. You handled the books. You would pay the workers on the farm, even when you were a little boy. And my father said, what you got to do is that you got to find your road now. You got to find your gifts, and you got to grow those gifts and those talents. My father said, you are a businessman. I said, a businessman? I said, you're the businessman. He said, no, son. He said, listen, I'm done. He said, but look, and my father knew this because my father taught us to be responsible, accountable, and self-sustaining. My father said, try your hand at entrepreneurship. Find that which you're good at. And so he said, but I'll tell you this, if you fall in the process, he said, your mom and I'll be there to pick you up. But he said, you got your other brothers and sisters here, and I'm sure you would not want that to happen. And so I never, because my parents were so good to me, Jodia, I never wanted to come back to my father and ask him for money. And so I'll never forget, about a week later, there was this advertisement. I ran into someone somewhere on Capitol Hill, was talking about Dick Gregory and his Bahamian diet and this thing called pyramid multi-level marketing. I didn't care about the diet. I didn't care about any of that. All I knew is that I needed to find a way to introduce myself to this thing called business. It's one thing managing your parents and dealing with the payroll, but doing it for yourself is a whole different ballgame. So I'll never forget, I went to Baltimore for this meeting. And in the end, I must have signed up 300 people. But my first check was $16. My second check was $260. But my third check was about $1,800. And the fourth check was $4,000 and $16,000, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. And I couldn't believe so quickly. But even before that, one of the things my parents taught us, which I think is very important when we're teenagers, is this thing that's squirreling away. Because my parents would pay us for working on the farm. And my parents would always tell us to put aside 20%. As if it's not yours, you put it aside for a rainy day. No matter what you make, put aside 20%. So even when I was 16 and 17, I would always squirrel away. And my father always say, never tell your brothers and sisters, don't tell your friends, because if people think you got money in your pocket, it's burning. They want to take it. They want to find a way to spin it, or they want to find a way to use it for themselves. He said, so when you're saving money and squirreling away, never tell anybody. So I squirreled away from the time I was about 16. By the time I was 31 years old, that money had accumulated into about $3.8 million. So for me, I never had a choice of working for someone or staying in a job because I had to make a financial decision. I could ask for little or no money, didn't really care about promotions or bonuses because I was really there to learn. It was like an apprenticeship for me. And so eventually, when I was 27, 28 years old, after working for Bob Brown in Highport, North Carolina, in the area of public relations and international business and traveling the world, I decided I just didn't want to do it anymore because I had enough money to sustain myself. So I set up an international public relations firm. And in between all that, I had a chance to meet this guy by the name of Terry Giles, who was Richard Pryor's manager. And at a young age, I brought Richard Pryor to Washington, D.C. And it's not so much that I brought Richard Pryor to Washington, D.C. for his first political speech during the Reagan administration. It's just that I met this guy, Terry Giles, who also, like my father, saw an entrepreneur gene in me from the multi-level marketing, from the squirreling away. And he said to me, if you come up with $25,000, I'll invest it for you. You have to trust me, but I can turn that into millions in about 10 or 15 years. And my attitude is, what did I have to lose? So I was able to send him the $25,000, and shortly enough, the force multiplier effect was unbelievable. So by the time I was 30, I was accumulating this money, but I was also squirreling away. And it's that money that allowed me, when the opportunity came along to buy the television stations about 8 or 9 years ago, I was able to do it without any kind of hesitation. So it's what you do early on in life. In your teenage years, when you squirrel away, you find a business that you work hard in, you build it. And it's not only that you grow it for yourself, you've got to empower other people too. I may go to the bank, depositing a much bigger check, but my executives, my managers all go to the bank, also deposit in a check. But you got to make sure that you're empowering them, that they can deposit something too, that they're growing. So I always have had this philosophy, no matter how successful I may have been financially, I always included other people to make sure they were successful as well.
Now, transitioning to generational wealth, I'd like to understand, how do you define generational wealth? In particular, in communities of color, why is generational wealth very important?
Generational wealth is that you just don't build the wealth as my parents did for their generation. You build it for the children. Wealth. And my attitude is, Jodia, you don't really create anything. God creates everything. You just rediscover it. And it's on loan to you for your lifetime. And it's not just for your benefit. You got to do a lot of philanthropy. You got to help people in need. You got to empower the communities that you're in. But also, equally important, going back to your question about generational wealth, you also give the next generation, your nieces, your nephews, your sons, your daughters, an opportunity to also accumulate the same kind of wealth. How do you do that? We are able to set up finances where if one of our nieces or whomever want to go to college, there's a fund to set that up. You help them play the stock market, where you show them how the stock market works, and you help them learn about stocks, which help them learn about math and the economy and learn about companies, and where they invest in that at a very young age. And you start them investing in the stock market at 17, and by the time they're 20, 22, they're so prolific because this generation is much more smarter than we were in terms of the math and the algorithms. Financial independence, financial freedom does not prevent you from being sick. It does put you in a better neighborhood and give you better health care and better access to things that give you a better chance at longevity. So there are things that wealth can do. While it cannot solve definitely all issues, it can give you options and choices. And I think all we ever want to do in life is to have more options and more choices. And this is how you create generational wealth, not just by giving it to your generation because they want to appreciate it, won't appreciate the hard work, they won't appreciate the sacrifice, the discipline, and they won't have the respect for it that you have. But if you make them a part of it, they grow with you as you grow the wealth, whether it's the hotels that we're involved in, whether it's the travel agencies that we used to be involved in, or the limousine companies that we used to be involved in, even in the broadcast business. My niece, Logan, works at the stations during the summer so she can learn the business, immerse herself into it. And as a result of her being exposed to the broadcast business, she's taken an interest in cybersecurity. This is how you empower people, not by giving them something, but building something like homes that grow in value, that you can pass along. Because when you have ownership, you know, especially in the minority community, almost 50% of their wealth is in their homes. And so you have to encourage that and you have to grow that.
Armstrong, you've been in business for many years and you've weathered many storms. We're currently now in COVID-19. Can you share some feedback or advice that you would have for entrepreneurs and small business owners that are currently weathering the storm?
It's like going back to the farm. The seasons are always changing. We've had seasons where crops did not grow, where famine has hit the crop, where bugs have hit the crop. And then we had seasons where it just thrived. The one thing you learn growing up on a farm, you can't take anything for granted. All you can do is learn from the Bible, from the story of Joseph, and you're squirreling away. You stored up the grain and everything just in case, because they were told that a famine would come and that famine would last for 7 years. And so what you have to do is when you have those good seasons, you got to scrape something away just in case when the bad season and the bad days and the trials and the tsunami may come, you have enough stored up that you can survive it. So for me, in COVID-19, it's important to be heavy liquid, but it's also important to be built up with spiritual currency. You know, I talk about the financial currency, you know, your faith, how you treat people, how you grow your neighbor, how you empower, how you give, how you pay your tithes, how you empower your community, how you honor yourself with character and integrity. All that has to do with spiritual currency. It's not just enough about how you create wealth. You got to create wealth in terms of your values, in terms of your integrity. All that goes into it. Because I have been such a steward of what we've built and what we've been blessed with, while most people are spending the money that they made in 2020, or they probably made in late 2019, I'm probably spending the money I made in 2014 or 2013. So that is the philosophy for me. I'm not spending what I made in 2019 or 2020 or 2018 or 2017. I am fortunate that I'm still living and feeding on what we built in the early 2000s. So that's the difference.
Wow, that was a great lesson about how to handle your money. I mean, for you to be able to be spending money that you made in 2014 and not touching anything from 2019, that is definitely a lesson that all of our entrepreneurs and small businesses will gain from. Thank you so much for sharing that. So on your journey into entrepreneurship, being a small business and now a business mogul. I know that there have been some folks that you've crossed paths with. Who have been those folks that have helped you and mentored you throughout your journey?
Oh, my parents, my mother, her moral striving, how to treat people, never to become too big for your britches, humility, pay your tithes on Sunday. Remember, all things come from God. There is always something greater than you. Always be there for your brothers and sisters and your friends, because they'll be your best allies when you have nothing. Protect them when they're in trouble. Remember, they're your troubles too. I learned that from my mother. From my father, I learned work ethic. I learned discipline. I learned sacrifice. I learned business. But I learned how to be a man. I learned how to stand on my own. I learned how to let my voice echo when people are trying to malign you, when you're in the storm, or when someone's trying to treat you out of a contract. I've learned from my father how to stand for myself. And then there was Justice Thomas. I met him when I was a young boy in my early 20s. He taught me about the law. He taught me about the government. I worked for him for 4 years. And then there was Bob Brown, who really gave me my chance to experience working for a company and working for an overseas company and traveling internationally around the world. I learned about global, and that the United States is just a spot in the world. There's a whole global place out there. We need to experience their culture, their ideas, the differences, and also network with the world, because the world is a globe now, especially with technology and the internet. And there was Dr. Carson. You know, I've known Dr. Carson for 25 years. He ran for president. I managed his campaign, but he taught me about medicine, health, morality, goodness, sometimes how to, you can say it, but it's how you say it. I have so much respect for him, but it particularly when it comes to the human anatomy. And then there's David Smith, who saw in me as an entrepreneur and realized that I did well of accumulating and saving money, and knew how expensive the broadcast business was. But I got into business when we were early on, creating programming for Sinclair back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And he said to me one day, he said, "Wow, you have a gift for creativity. You have a gift for broadcast." He said, "You're a businessman." He said, "You need to own television stations." He said, "You're the ideal person that can own television stations." He said, have you ever thought about it? I said, "Absolutely not." And then lo and behold, this is how life works. The WWMB CW21 was up for sale in Myrtle Beach. It's the hometown where I grew up, and the television station that my parents, my family, my cousins, and everybody I grew up watched. And he gave me an opportunity to buy the television station in my hometown. Jodia, I could not say no. I bought it, and then I bought the NBC WEYI in Flint, Michigan, and the rest is history. It was his mentorship and his belief in me that encouraged me. And then I had to convince myself, can I learn the TV business? Can I manage network stations? Can I manage these employees? Can I be in the 24-hour news business? And yes, Jodia, we can. Because the bottom line, if it can be taught, I can learn it. If you can read it, I can understand it. If it has to do with work ethic and discipline, I've been prepared for that all my life. If it has to do with integrity and morality and being fair and honest, I learned that from my mother as a child. So yes, I was prepared. And I realized that after a year in the business, I said, we can do this. We can do this.
Wow, mentorship is really important. I thank you for sharing your mentors with us and for you being a mentor to so many. So let's switch to a little bit of fun before we wrap up this segment. Armstrong, this may be a little stretch for you, but what is your best business purchase that you have made under $100?
Under $100, the best business investment I've made under $100. I probably gold coins.
Gold coins, wow.
Yeah. Early in my life, well, I collect coins and I collect stamps, and I was able to purchase a gold coin for less than $100. Somebody was desperate to save it; they needed the cash, and it turned out to be worth a little mini. I'll let you complete the sentence. Yes, that was the best investment. No one has ever asked me that before, by the way. Yes, investing in gold coins, especially at the time gold prices they were very low.
Wow, I really wasn't expecting that. I don't know if we'll ever be able to get gold coins for under $100 again. Some folks have told me that their best business purchase has been their plants or a monitor, but you really topped this one. I guess I should have expected that since you are a mogul. Gold coins. So Armstrong, how do you as a mogul unwind after a crazy day or even a crazy year of business?
Well, it's actually easy, because I don't work. My life is a hobby. I love the people I work with. We travel the world, going home. I'm running at 4:30 in the morning. I work out. I've always worked out. I never stopped since being on the farm. And then I'm in the office by about 6:30. I don't leave until about 4:30 or 5. And normally I grab a book. I rarely watch TV. I know that may surprise you. Even though I'm in the broadcast business, I'll grab a book. And literally, it's the book that puts me to sleep. Some people listen to classical music. There's nothing like a book. I can't do audio. In fact, for me as a writer, as a syndicated writer, I write my best columns when it's pen to pad, and not when I listen to the audio. So I'm a guy that has to read. And it's like it puts me to sleep. The next thing I know, I'm awakened in the morning around 3:45 a.m. And that's usually my routine. I go to sleep with a book in my hand.
Wow, fabulous insights. Armstrong, thank you so much for joining us at Biz Talks today.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy to see that you're doing this. I just feel so good after this conversation because it's things that I don't get a chance to talk about, and we should always share with others. You got to pass it on. Again, you cannot empower others without empowering yourself. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So can you tell us, where do you park at on social media?
My handles?
Yes.
Oh, at A Right Side, and then Armstrong Williams is Facebook. At Right Side is the Twitter, the Instagram. Is that the answer? Parking? Is that what they?
Yes, that's what the cool kids are saying. So where do you park at on social media?
Okay, at A Right Side. Yes, at A Right Side. ARIGHTSIDE.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been a very special episode 10, featuring Armstrong Williams. Armstrong, many, many, many thanks. And for you entrepreneurs and small businesses, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jodia Vanel. You watch us, you like us, you comment, and you share.